"If you don't like my parents living here, you can leave," my wife said. I cooked for them, washed their clothes, and lent my office to her brother. They had been living in my house for free for 10 months. When I asked for a little space, she simply replied, "They are my priority." That night, I slept in the car. At dawn, I made a transfer. She didn't know it, but she had just signed her eviction notice. The cold of the driver's seat woke me at 5 a.m. My back screamed in pain, and my neck was twisted at an angle that shouldn't be humanly possible. For a second, I remembered where I was, then everything came back like a slap in the face. My own wife had kicked me out of my own house. I sat there watching my house through the fogged-up windshield. I could see the silhouette of someone moving in the kitchen, probably my mother-in-law preparing her tea, as if she owned the place, because basically, she did. It all started 10 months ago, 10 damn months that felt like 10 years. Carmen came home that Tuesday looking worried. Her parents were having financial problems. Her father's business wasn't doing well, and they needed a place to stay for a few weeks, just until they got reorganized. "A few weeks," she said. I wanted to be the good son-in-law, the understanding husband, so I said yes. After all, it was a temporary situation. We would help the family, and everyone would be fine. How naive I was. The first few days were normal. Don Roberto and Dona Marta constantly apologized for the inconvenience. They bought their own groceries, cleaned up after cooking, behaved like grateful guests. But something changed in the third week. First, it was subtle. Dona Marta started reorganizing my kitchen to be more efficient, she said. Don Roberto started changing the TV channels without asking. Carmen said it was normal, that they were feeling more comfortable. Comfortable was an understatement. By the second month, they had taken complete control of the living room. Don Roberto had his favorite armchair. Dona Marta had changed the curtains because she didn't like mine. I found myself asking permission to use my own TV. But the moment I really understood what was happening was one Wednesday night. I came home from work tired and hungry. I went to the kitchen to make myself something, and Dona Marta intercepted me. "There isn't enough chicken for everyone," she said. "I've already served the plates for Roberto, Carmen, and me. There's a little rice left over if you want." In my own house, with food that I had bought, they were rationing my dinner. Carmen was at the table laughing at something her father had said. When I told her what had happened, she looked at me as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Mom is trying to manage the food better," she said. "It's for everyone's good." That night, I went to bed with an empty stomach and a strange feeling in my chest, as if I were an intruder in my own life. The following weeks were a slow-motion horror movie. Every day I lost a little more territory. Every day I felt more like an employee in my own house. Dona Marta started waking me up at 6 a.m. to go to the supermarket before work. The shopping list grew every week. Food that I didn't eat, expensive cleaning products, creams, and medications for Don Roberto. One day I added up the receipts. $300 a week on food for 4 people. I used to spend $150 for Carmen and me. When I tried to talk to Carmen about the expenses, she said it was temporary, that as soon as her parents stabilized, everything would return to normal. But by the 4th month, Don Roberto had turned my study into his operations center. He had papers everywhere, used my computer for his things, my desk was full of his projects. And then came Miguel, Carmen's younger brother. He showed up one Saturday with 2 suitcases and a smile. He had lost his apartment and needed a place to stay while he got a job. Temporary, of course. Miguel settled into my office, my sacred workspace where I did freelance projects to earn extra money. Overnight, it became the bedroom of the unemployed brother-in-law. I worked from home 2 days a week. Now I had to go to coffee shops because Miguel slept until noon and needed silence. By the 6th month, there were 5 of us in a house designed for 2. 5 people using my internet, eating my food, using my utilities. The electricity bill doubled, the water tripled, the internet became incredibly slow because everyone was connected all the time, and I paid for everything. When I asked them to contribute to the expenses, Don Roberto patiently explained to me that they were going through difficulties, that as soon as their situation improved, they would compensate us for everything. Carmen backed up every word. My wife, who was supposed to be my partner, my team, had become the official spokesperson for the parasites that had invaded my home. By the 8th month, I was officially the house servant. I woke up at 5:30 to prepare breakfast for 5 people. I washed everyone's clothes because Dona Marta complained that she didn't know how to use my washing machine correctly. I cleaned the dishes because Miguel was allergic to detergent. Miguel, who had no job, but did have very specific allergies and an impressive collection of excuses. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I arrived home after a horrible day at work. I just wanted to shower and relax in my office, but Miguel was there with 2 friends playing video games on my computer. I asked them to give me a moment to use my own space. Miguel looked at me as if I were crazy. "We're in the middle of an important game," he said. "We'll be done soon." 3 hours later, they were still there. When I finally exploded and told Carmen that this was ridiculous, she took me to the room and closed the door. Her family was going through a difficult time, she said. I was being selfish. They needed our support. Our support, as if she had contributed a penny. Last night was the last straw. I came home, and there was no hot water. It turns out that Don Roberto had decided to remodel the guest bathroom and had disconnected something wrong. The whole house without hot water on a Friday night. I told Carmen that it was enough, that we needed to talk about boundaries and time, that 10 months was too long for temporary guests. Her answer broke something inside me. "If you don't like my parents living here, you can leave." Just like that. Just like that, cold. I reminded her that it was my house, my name on the deed, my money paying for everything. "They are my priority," she said, with a coldness I had not seen before. "If you can't understand that, then maybe you need to rethink what is important in life." That night, I slept in the car. The pain in my back was nothing compared to the humiliation I had been carrying these last few months. While I was sitting there in my Honda Civic at 5 a.m., I remembered exactly how I had become the unpaid house servant of my own family. My typical day began at 5:30, not because I wanted to, but because Dona Marta had decided that breakfast should be ready at 7 a.m. sharp. Everyone had different schedules, and I had to accommodate each one. Don Roberto wanted scrambled eggs with ham. Dona Marta only ate oatmeal with fresh fruit. Carmen had suddenly developed gluten intolerance, so she needed special bread that cost $8 a loaf. And Miguel? Miguel wanted pancakes from scratch because the boxed ones didn't taste the same. I ate what was left over if there was anything left over. After breakfast came the first round of cleaning. 5 people generate an obscene amount of dirty dishes, especially when 2 of them spend all day at home watching TV and eating snacks. At 7:30, I rushed to work, but not before receiving the shopping list for the day. Dona Marta had taken on the role of household administrator, and her lists were epic 3-page novels. Skim milk for Don Roberto, whole milk for Miguel, almond milk for Carmen, lactose-free milk for Dona Marta. 4 types of milk for 4 people living in the same house. Don Roberto's medications were a separate chapter. Pills for blood pressure, imported vitamins, arthritis creams that cost $50 a tube. All without health insurance, because officially he didn't live with me. But I couldn't use that as an argument because then I would be an insensitive monster who didn't care about his father-in-law's health. At work, I tried to concentrate, but my phone rang constantly. Dona Marta asking if I had paid the cable bill. Don Roberto complaining that the internet was slow. Miguel asking me to transfer money for a job interview that never materialized. Carmen texted me to remind me to stop by the pharmacy, the supermarket, the hardware store, and the bank, all during my lunch break because they couldn't go out. Why they could never go out was never clear. The afternoons were my favorite time because, for 3 hours, the house was quiet. Don Roberto napped, Dona Marta watched her soap operas, Miguel played video games with headphones. But that peace ended when Carmen arrived from work. She immediately became the family's director of operations. She had secret meetings with her parents about plans that never included me. They made lists of things I needed to do. They decided on changes to the house without consulting me. One day I arrived, and they had moved all the furniture in the living room. They had bought a new sofa with my credit card because the previous one was not comfortable for Don Roberto's back. $1,200 on a sofa I didn't choose for a living room I could no longer use. When I protested, Carmen explained that Don Roberto had back problems and needed an orthopedic seat, that I was selfish for putting money over her father's health. Dinner was another theatrical production. I cooked for 5 people with completely different tastes. Don Roberto didn't eat spicy food. Dona Marta didn't eat carbohydrates. After 6 p.m. Carmen was in her vegetarian phase. Miguel only ate meat. Making a meal that satisfied everyone was physically impossible, so I ended up making 4 different meals every night. After dinner, I washed dishes while they watched TV. Then I cleaned the kitchen while they planned the next day. Then I took the clean clothes to their rooms while they relaxed in my living room. Weekends were worse because everyone was home all the time. Don Roberto had decided that Saturdays were for home improvement projects. Projects that he directed and I executed: painting the fence, fixing the leaky bathroom, cleaning the gutters, all with materials that I bought and work that I did while he supervised from a comfortable chair with a beer in his hand. On Sundays, Dona Marta organized family lunches. She invited sisters, cousins, neighbors. I bought food for 15 people, cooked for 15 people, and cleaned up after 15 people. Meanwhile, Carmen walked around like the perfect hostess, receiving compliments for the food I had prepared and the house I maintained. The issue of Miguel was an infected wound that grew every day. He had arrived with the promise of getting a job in 2 weeks. 6 months later, he was still professionally unemployed. He had interviews that were canceled, jobs that didn't suit him, bosses who didn't understand him. But he did have time to use my office as his personal game room. My desk was full of his things, my books piled in boxes, my work equipment crammed into a corner. The room smelled of dirty clothes and stale food. When I needed to work on my freelance projects, I had to ask his permission to use my own space. Sometimes he said yes, usually after 10 p.m. when he had finished playing with his online friends. Other times he told me he was busy with important things. Job searching, he explained, although his job searches seemed to involve a lot of gunfire and explosions. The last straw came last Tuesday. I had an important video conference with a potential client, a project that could generate $5,000 in extra income, money that I desperately needed after 10 months of supporting 5 people. I explained to Miguel that I needed the office for 2 hours, just 2 hours, for this crucial meeting. He said he understood perfectly. At 3 p.m., the time of my meeting, I arrived home and found Miguel with 3 friends playing a video game tournament. The room was filled with smoke, beer cans, and shouting. I reminded him of our conversation. "Oh yeah, I forgot," he said without taking his eyes off the screen. "We organized this tournament weeks ago. I can't cancel now." I lost the client. $5,000 vanished because my unemployed brother-in-law had more important priorities than my work. When I told Carmen, she said Miguel had made an honest mistake, that I should be more understanding with someone who is going through depression from not finding a job. Depression that didn't stop him from playing video games 12 hours a day. Last night, everything exploded. I came home after a particularly horrible day. My boss had yelled at me for a mistake that wasn't mine. Traffic had been hellish. My credit card had been declined at the supermarket because I had reached the limit buying food for 5 people. All I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and have 5 minutes of peace. But there was no hot water. Don Roberto had decided to fix the faucet in the guest bathroom and had broken something in the system. The whole house without hot water on a Friday night. When I suggested calling a plumber, they told me it was an unnecessary expense, that Don Roberto could fix it himself, that he just needed time to understand the problem. 3 hours later, we still didn't have hot water, and Don Roberto was still playing with the pipes as if it were a fun puzzle. That's when I exploded. I told them I couldn't take it anymore, that 10 months was enough, that they needed to find another place to live. Carmen took me to the room and closed the door. Her family needed me, she said. I was being selfish and insensitive. How could I ask them to leave when they clearly had nowhere to go? I explained that I had become the servant of my own house, that I worked all day to support people who contributed nothing, that I had lost my space, my money, and my dignity. Her answer chilled my blood. If you don't like my parents living here, you can leave. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. I reminded her that it was my house, my name on the deed, my money in the payments, my decision to sell it. Are you crazy? She shouted. You can't leave us homeless. We're your family. You left me homeless last night, I reminded her. You told me that if I didn't like it, I could leave, so I left, and I took my house with me. I hung up before she could answer. The next calls came in rapid succession. Don Roberto trying to sound authoritarian, Dona Marta crying, Miguel asking if it was a joke. I gave everyone the same answer, 30 days. That night I stayed in a hotel. A nice hotel with unlimited hot water, room service, and no one asking me to buy medications or cook for 5 people. For the first time in 10 months, I ate what I wanted, watched the TV I wanted, and slept without interruptions. My phone vibrated all night with messages from Carmen, pleas, threats, promises that everything would change. Too late. The next day Carmen showed up at my office. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't slept. We can't get a place in 30 days, she said, especially for 5 people. And we don't have money for a deposit. You should have thought about that before you turned me into your house servant, I replied. But we're family, she pleaded. Family doesn't treat family like this, I said. Family contributes. Family respects. Family doesn't exploit. Carmen left crying. 3 days later, I received the divorce papers. I signed them immediately. Sometimes the closest people are the ones who betray you the most. Don't let anyone, no matter how close they are to you, turn your generosity into their right. True love does not exploit, does not abuse, does not take without giving anything in return. And remember, your home is your sanctuary. When someone makes you feel like a stranger in your own house, it's time to decide who really leaves. Because in the end, lost dignity is more expensive than any house.